Hello, and thank you for joining us here on the Neutral Zone. I am Phil Milani, joined as always by my trusty sidekick, my partner in crime. Really, the best way to describe this person is my everything is Eric Dalala.
Phil, good to see you. Good to be with you there. Sorry, this is my first time on Zoom for those people watching this on YouTube. I'm working on it. We're only a year into the pandemic. We had an in-person press conference today, Phil. I've kind of forgotten how to use technology now.
We are recording this on a Thursday afternoon, and Eric, both you and I are in the office at the same time together.
That's right. With just one small door separating us, Phil, for some COVID precaution, but you're close enough that I could be out there in moments if something happens to you.
Eric, unfortunately, we had to have new intro music into the Neutral Zone today. That, of course, is because Philip Lindsay, part of our old intro, and he's no longer with the Broncos.
Yeah, that's I know tough for Broncos fans to handle. We'll get into that a little bit, Phil, but I think it was time.
Yeah. Of course, Philip Lindsay and the Broncos agreeing to go their separate ways, a mutual decision here, and we'll dive into that on this episode. Plus, today we heard from George Paton, really for the first time since free agency actually started, and he had a chance to answer some questions, including something on the quarterback.
That's right, Phil. I think people, as we record this at 5:29 Mountain Time on Thursday, so it could change in moments. But the Broncos have not signed a free agent quarterback. I know that a lot of people thought maybe they were going to bring in an Andy Dalton, a Mitch Trubisky, whoever it might be. They've been quiet so far. George Paton, he addresses your concerns. He tells you what's going to happen next. I thought a good answer from him there, which I won't spoil, but Phil, he says enough without saying too much, and he says it very succinctly. Not a lot of wandering answers from George Paton. He just says what he wants to say. On to the next question.
He's very calculated in what he's saying. Definitely does his homework on how to address the media. And like you said, does not ramble. He cuts himself off before giving up too much information. But he does provide some insight on where they are with the quarterback position. That was nice of you to talk about Andy Dalton there. Who else did you mention, Eric?
Mitchell Trubisky.
I don't think anybody cares about those two. They want to know what's going on with Deshaun Watson. Have you made any phone calls about Russell Wilson? That's what people want to know about.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. He didn't answer that either.
Yeah, he didn't answer that, but he did give us a little bit of an update on where they are mentally. So we'll talk about that just for a little bit, and then we'll also talk about Von Miller. Last week on the Neutral Zone, we said by this time next week we would find out more about Von Miller, and yes, we did. Von Miller coming back for his 11th season with the Broncos. Does it count as an 11th season if he didn't play at all last year?
Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth on that. It'll be his 11th year with the Broncos, but maybe his 10th season. Does that count? Is that fair?
I don't know, because even that year where in 2013 he tore his ACL, he had the suspension. I think you count that season. So I don't know.
He did play part of that year though.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. We heard from George Paton about his expectations for Von Miller after they agreed to the option. Hey, now Von's got to really play at a high level. George talked about where he thinks Von Miller is right now, so we'll get into that. Plus, we have a one-on-one, Eric, with Ronald Darby, the new Broncos cornerback. Had a chance to sit down with him, and I asked him, just about what he feels like he's going to be able to provide for the Broncos, and also why he wanted to play for the Broncos. Eric, I don't think many quarterbacks want to come to the AFC West and play Patrick Mahomes twice, Justin Herbert twice, but he said, no, this Denver defense is ready to do big things, and he wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, and my favorite answer, not from your one-on-one, Phil, I won't spoil that, but from his main press conference. Someone said, what do you still need to prove? What motivates you? He said, I'm not a Pro Bowler yet. I'm not an all-pro yet. I got those things to take care of. I want to do those things. I like when people set high goals right off the top.
Exactly. I mean, you kind of forget personally where some of these guys are because, you think, okay, Ronald Darby, he's won a Super Bowl. He's played on some really good teams. But you forget personally, hey, he wants to make a Pro Bowl. He's got individual goals as well as I think once you win a Super Bowl, you want to win another one. You want to when you get that taste, you want it again. And I asked him about that in our one-on-one. So we'll also discuss the addition of Mike Boone, the running back, who, if for all intents and purposes, is coming in to replace Philip Lindsay, I guess.
Yeah, our friend Mike Kliss, for those of you who didn't watch the press conference live, should make sure to check it out on denverbroncos.com. Nice little exchange there with our friend Mike Kliss. He asks a question. Phil, we've heard Mike ask some good questions over the years. This is right up there with the very best.
Yeah, make sure to check out the press conference. Eric, if fans want to get involved in the show in the neutral zone, this is not just a one-way street where we just talk. We want this to be an engaging podcast. So if you'd like to get involved, you're listening, pick up the phone, call 707 neutral, leave us a voicemail, and we'll play it right here on the air. Let us know what you think about some of the things we're going to talk about here. What do you want the Broncos to do at the quarterback position? And what do you think Bond can do next season? 707 neutral. You can also leave an email.
That's right, Phil. I haven't gotten too many recently. People have been turning to the voice mailbox, but neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. Ben Swanson still checks it every single day. So send your emails in.
Yes, he does. Ben Swanson, a dedicated podcast supervisor, try-outer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can also hit us up on Twitter. The Broncos Podcast Network has its own Twitter account. Make sure you check that out. Or you can find us at Eric Dalala with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. Non-traditional spellings there, kind of strange, but those are all the ways that you can get involved in the show. So, Eric, let's just dive in. And the big news on this Thursday was the Broncos and Philip Lindsay deciding to mutually part ways. What did you think about the decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think the writing was kind of on the wall, and we'll get to this in a little bit. But when you agree to terms with Mike Boone, who was essentially Minnesota's fourth running back, but I think had some potential that we've seen, the Broncos, it sounds like, wanted him to come in and compete for that number 2 running back position. His salary, based on reports, was higher than the tender that Philip Lindsay was offered, a right of first refusal tender. And that was kind of an interesting decision to begin with, because when that decision was made instead of a second round tender, it kind of signified that Philip Lindsay was probably on the way out, because unless the Broncos could have matched, but I would think that unless the number was close, they probably would have let him walk. Otherwise, you might as well have just put a second round tender on him, which was $1 million more. Phil, I think once Boone agreed to terms, it became clear that even if Lindsay was here, that he would be battling for maybe the number 2 role, when I'm sure in his mind he wants to battle for a starting role somewhere. And so it probably just didn't fit with what his goals were. We've kind of seen some reports that maybe Lindsay didn't fit as well in Pat Shurmur's offense as a Melvin Gordon does. And so it just became clear that despite all the great things Philip Lindsay did, and I don't want to undersell him to any degree, because he came in, Phil, undrafted guy, number 2 jersey. He wore a number that running backs don't even wear, earned Terrell Davis's number, makes a Pro Bowl. I mean, he did some exciting things, but it was just time to move on.
And he is a fan favorite. I mean, he's the Colorado kid. He played at Denver South here in Denver, went to CU, my alma mater, then, makes his way to the Broncos after going undrafted. Obviously, that's an easy story to get behind. He's got the kind of character that you really love to see from your favorite football players. He's a team first guy. He brings the energy. He always thinks that, he could do anything out on the football field. But I think we've talked about this a little bit on the show here in previous episodes, Eric, that, when he didn't get the contract extension or a new deal last offseason, the table was really set for him to have a prove it type of season in 2020. Like, hey, we didn't give you the deal. In fact, we went out and got Melvin Gordon. But I think that they still said, okay, let's see what Philip Lindsay could do. I don't think they were completely out on him. And without a doubt, 2020 was not Philip Lindsay's best season. In fact, it was, out of his 3 seasons, it was his worst statistically. And then on top of that, at the stature, he's not the biggest guy, and running backs take a pounding in this league. And we've seen him not be able to finish 2 of his seasons. So I think a combination of those 2 things, you just, look forward and you're not sure about how much you're going to get out of Philip Lindsay moving forward. So it makes sense from the Broncos' perspective. From Philip's own perspective, I think he thinks that he can still play at that high level. He still thinks he could be that type of Pro Bowler. And when he wasn't getting the same, feeling reciprocated from Broncos management, he probably got upset himself and they wanted to just go their own direction. So I know it's probably a tough pill to swallow, but ultimately it probably makes the most sense for both parties.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, there was some sort of disconnect between what Broncos fans feel about Philip Lindsay and what management, the coaching staff. Clearly, the evaluation there is it's not the same because. And listen, I understand why fans like Philip Lindsay. He's from here. He's an emotional player. He doesn't look necessarily like he should be in the NFL because of his size, and yet like he plays as hard as anybody, and he's firing people up in the huddle. He's crazy running out of the tunnel. His touchdown celebrations are great. Like he's a fun guy to watch play football. But I just think his style was actually very similar to Melvin Gordon. And so they didn't complement each other all that well because they kind of did the same things. And then the second thing, and we'll get to this when we talk about Mike Boone a little later, Phil, is really to be a 3-down back in this league, you have to be able to pass protect and you have to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield to give the team another element. Otherwise, it becomes very clear when Philip Lindsay's in the game, you're running the ball. And unfortunately, I wish it would have been different, but we kept waiting for Philip Lindsay to take that step in pass pro or receiving out of the backfield. And it just never came to the degree that you would hope. And so I think when it came to a contract extension or a larger tender or whatever it is, that might have played a role in it of saying, hey, can we really afford to pay a running back top dollar, which is rare in the NFL anyway these days, but can we afford to pay one of them whose game is somewhat one-dimensional?
Yeah, and the final point on Philip Lindsay that I'll make here is just that he couldn't play special teams, really. He wasn't big enough to run down the field and make a tackle. And when George Paton was introducing Mike Boone on Thursday, he probably used the word special teams 17 times. He just talked about how great of a special teams player Mike Boone was for Minnesota. So a combination of reasons why things just didn't work out for Philip Lindsay here. Here's what. Oh, did you want to say one other thing here, Eric?
Well, I just think, and again, that's where Phillips' reality didn't line up with maybe the Broncos' reality, because the Broncos might expect their number 2 running back to play special teams. I'm sure at this point, Philip Lindsay doesn't want to play special teams. And so there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think when you make a Pro Bowl as a football player, you think that you've sort of reached an upper echelon, and he just never got that respect. But that's nothing new for Philip Lindsay. He's been treated like that pretty much his entire life when it comes to playing football. So I'm sure that chip in his shoulder is a permanent deal, and wherever he goes next, he's just going to want to prove the doubters wrong. And we'll have to see what's next for Philip Lindsay. Here's what George Paton said about the decision to mutually part ways.
We've had a lot of talks over the last couple of weeks with Philip and Mike McCartney, his agent. And, at the end of the day, we want to do right by Philip. He's been a great player here. He's been great in the community. He's one of the more popular players for the Broncos the last couple of years. And we wanted to let Philip hit the market and maximize his value. And so that's what we did. He deserved that.
In a way, a nice gesture there by the Broncos to allow him to hit the market. Eric, speaking about the open market, there are really no more free agent quarterbacks available. We all thought that the Broncos were going to bring in some sort of a quarterback to either compete with Drew Lock, push him to be the starter, or to just be a little bit more of a proven commodity as a backup quarterback in case things don't go right next season. They haven't really done that so far.
Yeah, and you've kind of seen some of these guys go off the board that you wondered, hey, could the Broncos be in on an Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, a Mitchell Trubisky? And again, you mentioned at the top, Phil, not necessarily the guys that fans want to hear about, but maybe guys that made sense given the circumstances, given that you hope to provide a little bit of competition with Drew Lock, Ryan Fitzpatrick off the board too. I mean, there's still a few guys out there, and Alex Smith maybe could make sense depending on what the 49ers do. Does a Jimmy Garoppolo become available? Does a Teddy Bridgewater become available from Carolina? But yeah, it's not the splash move. And so I really don't think there was I'm not sure there was a splash move to make in free agency with any of these veterans. I think you certainly would have improved your backup position and maybe put a little pressure on Drew Lock, but I don't think any of these guys is significantly better than Drew to the point where I would expect him to beat him out in training camp.
The interesting thing to me about it is for a free agent quarterback out there, you would have thought Denver would have been a pretty desirable spot just because you feel like maybe you could come in and beat out Drew Lock for that starting role. Maybe you're okay with being a backup for a little bit, and then you're inserted into that starting lineup later. And especially with the weapons the Broncos have on offense, you would have thought that some of these guys probably wanted to come to Denver. And the fact that nothing's materialized maybe tells you that the Broncos management is thinking in a different direction, whether that's a trade for a guy or maybe they're thinking about the draft. We know that George Payton was up at North Dakota State's pro day last week, checking out Trey Lance. So I think there's still a lot of options on the table, but nothing has been set in stone that could change at any second really here. But that is something that just to be interested, in paying attention to is, are they really involved in some talks for Deshaun Watson? Is that something that they're really taking like a big swing at where they're saying, we don't want any of these guys like Mitchell Trubisky. We're going to go put all our eggs in this basket and just see if we can get that guy. If it doesn't work out, we're fine with the room we have now.
Right. And one, the Deshaun Watson situation a little bit trickier now because there's an NFL investigation into a lawsuit that's been filed against him that he adamantly denies, but that's going to have to work itself out. And then the other thing is, Phil, I think everyone just assumed that George Payton would make a move at quarterback, but I think it's clear whether it's quarterback or any other spot, he's not going to make a move just for the sake of making a move. He's got to determine that there's value there, both from a talent level and a financial level, that those match up. And so if he thinks, hey, none of these guys on the board is significantly better than Drew, and for the money, it's not worth having him be a backup, let's ride with Drew for another year. He said, we're still high on Drew. And so, maybe it is that 2021, and I know fans desperately just want something different, but no matter what it is, but with Drew, if you give him another season and he still doesn't work out, then at least one way or another. And if he does work out, then hey, you've got your guy. But that to me is something that I expect we'll see quite a bit from George, is that he's never going to do something just for the sake of doing it or just to make a big splash. And I think the process they've got in place really helps with that. He mentioned today, Phil, talking about his cap guy, Rich Hurtado. He said, I can sometimes try to be aggressive. Rich reins me in a little bit. I think they've got a good partnership in place there. You've got to, you can't just trust one part of George Payton's vision. I know this is beyond the quarterback, but you can't just say, hey, I trust for him to pick up Vaughn's option. Like, he knows that Vaughn needs to stay here, but I don't like this decision about Philip Lindsay. He doesn't know what he's doing here, or he should have signed a quarterback. You've hired George Payton to put together a team in his vision, and you've just got to see where that vision goes in its entirety. And maybe it works. We hope it works. It seems so far like we're going in the right direction, but you can't just you can't evaluate it like one piece individually. It's not a vacuum. Everything is kind of working in a concert. And so to me, I give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt there and saying, hey, this is your first free agency. If this is your plan with the quarterback to go along with everything else, let's see what happens.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, the change you're talking about, it could simply just be an improved Drew Lock. Do you know what I mean? Yep. Fans were certainly happy with Drew after his first season when, he won 4 out of his first 5 games. Fans were really happy. So that change could just be an improved Drew Lock. And look, you mentioned it when we first started talking about quarterbacks. None of those guys were really splashy free agents to bring in. So I think this is a smart play. Like, hey, don't just make a move to make a move. I think what would be worse than having Drew be the starter, it not really work out, and then just having another mediocre player to turn to, and then just have that contract in the fold in addition. That would be worse than what's going on right now. So, hey, do your homework on the draft, which it seems like he's doing. He's taking it pretty seriously where he wants to evaluate the options at quarterback. Do that. And then maybe if something works out with a big trade for Russell Wilson, for Deshaun Watson, somebody like that, great. If not, then let's just go into this next season hoping for the best. So it's an approach that makes sense to me.
Right. I mean, you look at Chicago and, maybe Nick Foles ends up here, who knows, but you don't want to end up in a scenario where they try to fix something quickly and get Nick Foles. And then all of a sudden you have Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles. And now just as Mitchell Trubisky's a free agent and you could have maybe moved on and used cap space elsewhere, you still got Nick Foles under contract. And so it's, that's what happens when you try to put a Band-Aid on things without fully, committing to whatever your plan is. Phil, I do want to, since you brought up him saying that the draft is an option, and he was pretty forthcoming about, I'm going to be at these pro days for quarterbacks. Quarterbacks is definitely an option at 9. Do you buy that, or is that just the normal smoke screens that we see this time of year around the draft?
I think it could be a combination of both. I think that he legitimately wants to see these guys because I think the Broncos sitting at 9 and the young assets that they have, if they really fell in love with one of these guys, maybe they would make the move to go up. And we've talked about this before too, Eric. When I say fall in love, I mean all the guys falling in love, and there's a consensus there, and then they want to move up and make that big move. I think it makes sense to do your homework and just check that out and make sure. But I also think that, right now at this time of year, you're not giving anything really of substance away. He's not going to go out there and be like, we love Trey Lance, or we're definitely, whatever. So I think that there's probably some kind of angle to it, but I think it does make sense to just investigate.
Well, and I do think there's value too in letting teams, if he says we're not going to draft a quarterback, all of a sudden teams behind you or ahead of you or teams looking to trade are not as worried about you as a potential suitor. So, if New England wants to trade up to get a quarterback and they think Denver might want that guy, maybe they got to offer Denver a little bit more to trade down. So that's one thing is it's always good to make people wonder, are you being real about this? Are you not? The other thing too is maybe they're not planning to take a quarterback at 9 initially, but then say a guy falls down the draft board unexpectedly. We see this all the time. I think of like a Lyle Collins. Certainly this happened with Shane Ray back when the Broncos took him, but you see guys start to fall, and then there's teams that they never thought that guy would be there, so they haven't done the proper amount of homework on him and can't make that decision. If a QB starts to fall and you're at 9 and say Trey Lance and Justin Fields are both available, you want to know, if you're Denver, like, hey, is one of these guys worth the 9th overall pick? And if you've really done your work and you can say, yeah, Trey Lance is that guy, go get him. Or even if he falls to 7 or something and you're like, that's close enough, that's in our range, we love this guy, go get him. I mean, that's the point where doing your homework helps, because you don't want to be unprepared for any situation, even if it's a guy that you never expected falling to you. And Phil, if there's one thing we know about George Paton, based on everything we heard from Rick Spielman, the Vikings GM, talking to people that know him, is that he's always prepared and that he's going to put the work in. So to me, this just feels like part of that. I do think there's a chance they go quarterback at number 9. I would still say the odds are going with a different position, but I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely still don't think that's going to happen, but I think it makes sense to do your homework. Here's what George said about the quarterback position overall when he met the media on Thursday.
We're monitoring it. We've evaluated all the quarterbacks. We like Drew Lock. We have a plan in place, and there's free agency, there's a draft, there's trades. There's a lot of ways to acquire a quarterback. Fortunately, we have a quarterback here, and we have a nice quarterback room. We do want to bring in competition. We're not going to force it, and so we're monitoring the market right now.
Interesting. Just he says that they have a plan in place. They're monitoring things, but they feel like they've got a good room. So I think from Drew Lock's perspective, you got to be happy with what you heard there from George
Yeah.
on Thursday. So one guy who is getting his money and will be in a Broncos uniform for sure next season is Von Miller. The Broncos picked up his option earlier in the week. And Eric, I think that this was a good move for the Broncos because Von Miller, a fan favorite, much like Philip Lindsay, but maybe even more so. And also, I still think personally he could play at a high level.
Yeah, and I think it's worth, given what the rest of the edge market or edge rush market was with guys getting 15, 16 million, that it was worth going up a little bit higher for Vaughn. You're only committing to one more year. Who knows if they work out an extension or not? We'll have to see. But he's young enough that and showed enough, I thought, in training camp in 2020 that you hope he can be similar. George Payton said still has Pro Bowl aspirations for Vaughn. Plus, Phil, I just think this team has so many, well, not so many holes, because I think they filled a few here in free agency. But say you take Vaughn away and you've got Bradley Chubb, who he had a nice 2020, but his season, he had 7.5 sacks in 14 games. He's still coming off an ACL injury. We haven't seen him get back to that double-digit sack number. Then you have Malik Reed, who's a really nice player, but, you know, and maybe he makes a Shaq Barrett type jump, I don't know, but he doesn't necessarily seem like he's going to be a 15 sack guy. And so you wonder, do we have an elite pass rusher on this roster? And if not, that instantly becomes one of your top needs. And when on defense, you already need a cornerback, you already need a defensive lineman, you already may need a linebacker, you're going to need a safety now with Kareem Jackson's option not picked up. I mean, that's a lot of things to then add to take away maybe your best defensive player. And then instead of going into the draft and saying, hey, you know, if we, now that we have Ronald Darby in the fold, if we take one more corner, or if we trade down and get a corner and a safety, or, you know, then you feel really good about this defense. You're now thinking, well, how do we get a really good edge rusher in a class where there's only a couple of them? You know, you just put yourself in a bind and create more work for yourself. And so I think from both a need perspective, from a team side, and then also the fact that it is Von Miller and he's still really talented, it made sense, and much more so than trying to figure out the convoluted path forward without Von this year.
Yeah, I mean, their options away from Bond were just non-existent, really. You know, in terms of the
Yeah.
free agent market was essentially what Bond was going to get, and like you mentioned, the draft not really pass rush heavy. So then you're talking about just sticking with the guys that you got, and I think that you know the feeling last year during training camp was that Bond was about to have a crazy season. He had come back in such great shape, and when he got hurt, the whole team sort of got a little deflated. You know, certainly when the news first came out, it was like, oh my gosh. So I think you're still talking about an elite pass rusher. I think you're still talking about a special guy. Now, I think that Von, when he's locked in, we've seen him always play at a really high level. I think the times when he's kind of dipped a little bit or not had that consistency is when maybe he's not quite as focused as he had been at other times for whatever reason. But like I think it's definitely clear that like when DeMarcus Ware joined the Broncos, we saw an increased Von Miller. I think that like Von Miller's best season ever, his second season in the NFL, he was out to prove the whole world, you know, what he was about. So I think maybe you might see the most locked in Von Miller we've ever seen because everybody's doubting him. He's got a lot to prove. And coming off an injury, I think you really naturally want to say, I'm back. I still got it. And I think that Von Miller fits that mold. I mean, he had the injury, but aside from that, he looked like he was in really good shape. He looked like he was ready to take the league by storm. And I think it just made a lot of sense. And I think that's why he's back in a Broncos uniform.
Yeah, you know, he made it clear he wants to be here forever. He doesn't want it to just be this year. We'll see what happens. You know, it's possible that they get something done, that he's extended. You know, say he accepts another 2-year deal or something like that. He would be 34 35. At that point, maybe you're just on a series of 1-year deals or a couple of years. I mean, we see all these voidable years now. Uh, I think him being back this year increases the chances, obviously, of him finishing his career here. I still don't think it's certain. I mean, we saw with Chris Harris a couple of years ago, Chris held out, the team adjusted his contract, and then he was gone the next year. And there really were no talks about, there were reports that maybe some talks in the middle of the season, but nothing close necessarily. I'm hopeful they find a way to keep Vaughn. And I think if Vaughn is productive, they'll try to do that, because George Payton said, he is the type of guy, you see pass rushers like Bruce Smith, they can be productive into their 30s. We hope Vaughn's like that. If he plays well, I think he'll stay. But I'm excited at least that we get to see that, and that it would have been really tough if the lasting memory of Von Miller was just that he was out for the whole 2020 season, because it would have just made his last sack in a Broncos uniform like a 2019 game against the Raiders that nobody remembers because you didn't know it was Vaughn's last game. And so this way, at least, Broncos fans, say you get to go to one game this year, or you get to, even if you get to be there for all of them, you're going to enjoy seeing him play catch with a kid in the stands, or you're going to enjoy seeing him run in the tunnel or do a sack dance, because hey, he could be gone, and that you wouldn't have had that otherwise.
Yeah, and he's just a special player in this organization's history. I mean, he practically put the team on his back and helped them win Super Bowl 50. And this way, we finally get to see what it's going to look like under Vic Fangio with Bradley Chubb and Von Miller together out there. And who knows? I mean, if the offense plays better and the team overall is in better shape, that's going to lead to more sacks for Von. And, he could get back to having fun out there. He posted on Instagram the other day that he just wants to play football. And, I want to see it. I'm here for it. I'm ready for it. And here's what George Payton had to say on Thursday about what happened with Von's contract and some of the expectations he has for Von next season.
Von's been a priority. We wanted Von here since I've been here, since I was here, and we're going to try to do that any way we could. Had good conversations with Joby Brannon, his agent, and I've spoken with Von, and we ended up just exercising the option. He can rush the passer. The tape I watched, he still had the juice before he got injured. And pass rushers are a premium, and he's special. He's a special pass rusher, and you look at some of the great pass rushers of all time, they're rushing the passer well into their 30s. And Von's been working, and I think he's going to have a Pro Bowl type season.
No pressure, Von. He just thinks a Pro Bowl type season here, which obviously we all hope for and think. He also said that Von is special. He's special more than just a special pass rusher. He's a special kind of person. I mean, with all his flair and his love for chickens and just the personality, Von, I think he brings a lot to the organization. So
yeah, it is interesting when you think, when you say, hey, we want Ronald Darby to play at a Pro Bowl level. For Ronald Darby to make the Pro Bowl, he's probably going to have like 5 or 6 interceptions. He's got to play really, really well because he doesn't have that benefit of a household name. I mean, Von made the Pro Bowl a couple of years ago with 8 sacks. So, and we obviously know he has that type of potential. And so it's much less difficult to imagine Von Miller making a Pro Bowl. I mean, if he has any sort of bounce back season that's strong and he gets to 9 or 10 sacks, I would be surprised if he's not back in where it's going to Vegas, right? Is that where it's going?
I think so. Yeah.
So
I'd say Hawaii. Go back to Hawaii.
Yeah. Who cares where everyone else is going? You go to Hawaii.
Eric, you mentioned Ronald Darby there. Let's get to some of the free agent acquisitions the Broncos have made. Of course, they're bringing back Shelby Harris, another guy there, who we did not get to hear from. But we did get to hear from Ronald Darby. We also got to hear from Mike Boone. And let's just get straight to my one-on-one conversation here with Mr. Ronald Darby. Ronald, first of all, congratulations. Welcome to Denver.
Thank you, man. I'm excited to be out here. Can't wait to get started.
They got you already outfitted, man. You got the hat, you got the shirt, you're ready to go.
Yeah, they gave me the little starter kit. I'm excited.
Why did you feel like Denver was the best fit for you?
Last year I wanted to showcase that, I could play a full season. Injuries won't be a problem. and I'll always be grateful for Washington for that. But I feel as though Denver like had like a strong need for me. They wanted me like bad, and I feel like I could come over here and make plays.
What was that negotiating period like? I mean, why did you think they wanted you so much?
I mean, I just like talking to my agent and stuff. Like we both sat down and talked about it. I reached out to teammates that used to play here, like Bosby, things like that. Talked to him. He felt like it'd have been a good fit for me as well.
What do you know about this Vic Fangio defense? What do you think your role is going to be like?
I know to make plays. Yeah. That's my role in any defense, and I know like he mixed it up a good amount. And once again, I talked to Boss about the defense, telling me how they run things, and like it fits me well.
You feel like it's a good fit though because he's a defensive-minded head coach, strong defense. That's something you want to be a part of, right?
Yeah, it's a great fit. He, like you said, defensive-minded head coach, and I know he's gonna stay on top of me. I'm gonna stay on top of myself. We're gonna go out there and make plays, win games.
You're from Maryland. Was it hard to leave Washington?
Yeah, it was hard being in front of your family and friends, being so close to home. Even though COVID was going on, they couldn't come to a lot of games. So it was a little difficult, leaving, but I made the right decision at the end of the day.
And I saw on Instagram, have you been working out with Von Miller?
Yeah, we train at the same spot out West Hollywood, Jamal Liggins. So he out there busting his tail. We working hard.
Excited to play with a player like that?
Of course. I'm excited to play with the whole up front, Chubbs, everybody. I'm excited to play behind him.
Was Von recruiting you at all?
No, he didn't. He didn't know too much about what was going on. He was just out there, dancing, working out, having fun.
You mentioned your health earlier. I know that you've been through some ups and downs earlier in your career. Yeah. Last year, you were able to play all 16 games. You feel like that's in your past now?
Yeah, I just had to get over that little hurdle I was going through in Philly. It's like, because even before Philly, I never had any health problems all through college, never missed a game. So it was just a little rough patch in my career. But now that I got over it, like I'm back, healthy, and like ready to go.
That ankle okay? Because that injury, man, that looked...
Oh, yeah, it was bad. it was bad, They popped it back in place, but like I didn't have to get surgery or anything.
That's good.
It was nasty, though.
You were able to come back and be a part of that Super Bowl run, huh?
Yeah, I missed about like 6-7 weeks when I dislocated it, but I came back, played the second half of the season, all through the playoffs, Super Bowl.
Now that you got a taste of what it's like to win that Super Bowl, how much do you want to get back there and experience that level of winning?
I know what it takes, and I know the things that you got to go through. I know the obstacles, hurdles. I know the tough times, the fun times. Like, I've been there before, so I know, like, how to help other people get there.
You know what it feels like?
Yeah, I know what it feels like.
Yeah, got it. Do you think you'll be a leader in this secondary? I mean, you're a veteran coming in.
Yeah, I would try to. I always been the type of guy that like to lead by example, because there's a lot of guys that could be vocal and good at talking to people but not doing things right. Mm-hmm. So I'm the type of guy that like just go out there, work hard, and do my job. The
last couple of years you played under one-year contracts. To get this kind of commitment from Denver, how did that make you feel?
Grateful for one. For two, made me even, more hungry. Not saying I wasn't hungry at first, but like I just know like I just been through a lot, going through that. You get down on yourself, but you just got to keep pushing.
Yeah. I see that you got some tattoos. You got some sleeves.
Yeah.
You got a favorite tattoo?
Yeah, probably my Florida State one on my arm is my Florida State one for sure. I got this a couple days before we played in the national championship.
It was good luck then, huh?
Yeah.
I know you didn't run track at Florida State, but before that, you were a track superstar, man. You didn't just run track. I think you won a gold medal in the World Juniors, right?
Yeah, we won it in a relay. I got third, and I want to say third and fourth over in World Youth, but I won nationals. I won indoor nationals, New Balance in the 200. At the time, had the second fastest time all time, and I won summer track USATF, 100, 200.
In the combine, 4.37. I mean, you still got that speed?
Yeah, I believe I'm faster actually. I was coming out at the time. I just started doing speed training just to get ready for the combine, but I know I'm faster than that now.
Oh, what do you think you run now?
Right now, if I was to train, I could hit a 4.2 or at least a 4.3 low.
Okay.
For sure.
All right. Well, hey, we're looking forward to seeing that out on the
Yeah.
field. Welcome to Denver.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And my thanks to Darby for taking a little bit of time out to sit down and talk about, why he was interested in Denver. And also, he showed off his tattoo. If you're just listening in your car or something, make sure you check that out on YouTube, because he does have a really cool Florida State tattoo. Obviously won a championship down there in Tallahassee. So, Erica, let's talk about these two guys, Ronald Darby and Mike Boone. The two moves the Broncos have made so far. You think they're upgrades at their positions?
I mean, you hope so, don't you? I think that certainly Ronald Darby has the talent to be an upgrade. He's a former second-round pick. They love his speed, his cover ability. There's talk about William Jackson, Shaquille Griffin, Mike Hilton. There were a lot of options, and really everyone kind of came in very reasonably. Even William Jackson was only $3 or $4 million more per year than it's reported that Ronald Darby got. But it's clear that George Paton knew what he was looking for, and he was looking for a guy with that speed to be able to cover, to be in position. He mentioned a bunch of times Ronald Darby's ability to knock the ball away. That's something we haven't seen. There's been too many situations where the corners aren't in position to make plays. Ronald Darby is that guy, and healthy. He's really good. He's got Pro Bowl potential. We talked about that, Phil, that he still wants to reach that, realize that goal of being a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro. But I think it's a risk worth taking. It is a risk because he missed a lot of games in Philadelphia, and though he played 16 last year in Washington, you'd like to see him do that more consistently. But yeah, I feel good that he's a piece you can rely on. I think as things stand right now, barring some other sort of free agent move, I still lean toward taking a corner with that ninth position, and that maybe you want a bigger guy like a Patrick Surtain to kind of complement Darby. But I do like the move. Anytime you can, it's not buying super low, but anytime you can buy low on a guy that has a lot of potential, I like it. Seems like he has the right mindset. And Phil, I loved his answer in the main press conference. Someone said, "You've had a lot of pass deflections, not many interceptions. What do you have to do?" And he said, "I got to catch the ball." Thought it was a nice answer there.
Maybe him and Jerry Jeudy could spend some time together in the offseason.
Oh man!
No, I'm just.
Wow.
That was a low blow. That was a low blow. I'm just kidding.
Wow, cutting that one out for Twitter.
I'm just kidding.
It's gonna be Phil's last podcast with the neutral zone.
I agree with you, Eric. I think that he is a great addition. I think that he boosts that entire cornerback room. I'm not quite sure if he's the solution in terms of just him coming in. I think that you do want somebody who's a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit more physical, just to have that option depending on the team that you're facing. But you mentioned his speed. He says that he's faster than he was at the combine. He thinks that that's a big part of his game, and it's no coincidence, Eric, that the Broncos face a lot of speed in the Chiefs. I mean, let's just face it. I mean, they face a lot of speed over there. You got to have guys who can match up, and he's a guy who's going to be able to come in and do that. I like his personality. I like that he has been working out with Von Miller this offseason, at least at the same location. And I think that he's just going to elevate that whole room overall. I don't know if you can compare him directly to A.J. Boye, but I do think that he's a proven commodity in the league. And if he can stay healthy, he can play at a very high level. And hopefully his injury problems are behind him, and he's able to have a lot of success here in Denver.
Yeah, and here's the thing I'll say that's a little bit different is that Boye, he also had some injury issues, but there were seasons where he was healthy and didn't play super well. Darby, when healthy, which has not been all that much, but when healthy has played well. So it's been less of like a, is he a good enough player, and more just can he be available? He's closer to a Bryce Callahan in that way, in my opinion, where, Bryce last year was tremendous. I think you're hoping he can stay healthy and be a piece of this team, but his question is not, can he play good football? It's can he stay on the field? And I think for Darby, it might be a similar situation. And I do think, like you mentioned, Phil, he could benefit from having another guy there. I mean, you look at when he was in Buffalo his rookie year and made the all-rookie team, he had Stephon Gilmore there as the other cornerback. I think if you put a guy like a Caleb Farley or a Patrick Surtain in place opposite him, or another guy that you think has number one potential, he can be good. And maybe they're co-ones. Maybe it's less of like a situation. Maybe it's closer to like an Aqib Talib, Chris Harris type deal, as opposed to somewhere where like it's Stephon Gilmore and somebody. But again, intriguing potential. I'm excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, I just think the defense as it is now might run into some problems when they're facing a bigger person.
Yeah,
but,
and as George Payton said, hey, we got a few months before we have to play a game.
Yeah,
and he was the first to admit we've still got a lot of work to do on defense, but they made a couple of good moves to fill some holes. And by the time they get to the season, he thinks they're going to feel good about the defense.
And Darby was asked, "Are you going to play on the right side or are you going to play on the left side?" He said, "Probably the left side, but he'll just be happy to be out there." So I think that we'll have to just wait and see how this team comes together, and then maybe some of the schematics will present itself. Eric, how about Mike Boone? What is he bringing? Obviously, people are going to say that he's here to replace Philip Lindsay. Does he provide an upgrade there?
I mean, an upgrade is hard because, well, let's compare first in terms of just running the ball. It's going to be really hard to have an upgrade there from Philip Lindsay just because he was a Pro Bowler. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He was a good in-between the tackles runner who had speed once he kind of got through the initial clutter. I mean, make no mistake, just because the Broncos are moving on from Philip Lindsay, it doesn't make him not a good football player. He is a really good football player. Mike Boone has a lot of potential, I think. We may not have seen a ton of it because he was the fourth running back in Minnesota, didn't get a lot of opportunities, but in one of his two starts, he had 127 yards, I believe. He showed that potential. And then I do think there are areas where he will instantly be an upgrade. You mentioned earlier, Phil, special teams contributions. He can be in all four units. You want to talk about pass blocking. Sounds like he'll probably be an upgrade there, even though he's not a huge guy. That's more of a mentality, I think. And then pass catching. I mean, there's a highlight, Phil, that I put out on Twitter. It wasn't a preseason, granted, which I know you don't. Your guy Sean Mannion threw it in.
Sean Mannion, that's my guy.
But he showed on that play speed, the ability to make a quick cut, and then he ran somebody over and broke a tackle. Philip Lindsay, for his speed and his ability to run between the tackles, he didn't break a lot of tackles. And we talked about that all year last year, that Melvin Gordon's ability to do that kind of made him preferable in certain situations. If Mike Boone can show the same speed, can catch the ball out of the backfield, can break some tackles, can pass block, he might not be as good of a pure runner as Philip Lindsay, but he might be a more valuable football player.
Yeah, I mean, upgrade or not, when you stand next to Mike Boone, he looks a lot different than Philip Lindsay. I'll tell you that. I mean, he's built. He looks like he belongs in the NFL. And, we've talked about this a lot, Eric, that everybody brings up the fact that Philip Lindsay never fumbled when he was in the NFL, or with the Broncos, I should say. That's because usually he wasn't trying to break too many tackles. Like, he was just going down. That's a lot of times where fumbles occur. So I do think that Mike Boone is going to be able to provide a different dynamic. He's going to be able to do a little bit more, maybe play special teams again here. He's going to be able to be on the field in passing situations. So I think that the jury's still out on him. Obviously, he was behind Dalvin Cook in Minnesota, so he didn't get a ton of opportunities. But I'll tell you what, George Payton got to see him up close in person, and he felt strongly enough to try and bring him here. So it's not like he just saw some tape and was like, "Oh, this guy looks good. Let's take a shot on him." He was in the building with him. He knows what he's about. He knows the personality, and he made the decision to bring in Boone. So I'm excited to see what that room looks like as a whole, because now you got Gordon, Boone, Royce Freeman, Bellamy is still in the mix there, and who knows, they might bring in somebody else too. So we'll have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and listen, I think his attitude was right for the room. He talked about, I just want to do whatever helps this football team, whether it's special teams, whether it's playing the number 2 running back position. That's different than Philip Lindsay, who, granted, for deserved reasons, he was at the point in his career where he's saying, I want to be the starter. And so different, it's the same guys kind of filling the same role, but their expectations are different. If Mike Boone gets to be the number 2 running back and gets 5 to 7 carries a game, he's probably like, hey, that's a really good step for me in my career. Philip Lindsay, if he's the number 2 running back and gets 5 to 7 carries per game, is probably not happy with his role. And so I think you also have to manage that sort of situation. Like you mentioned, Phil, doesn't rule out taking somebody in the draft. And I think, it may be difficult to not compare these 2 signings, Darby and Mike Boone, because they were introduced on the same day. But Mike Boone is a strong depth signing. Darby is a starter. Mike Boone is kind of like a complementary piece. And so I don't think people need to freak out and be like, well, is Mike Boone good enough to be this top guy? Like, well, he's not expected to be that. He's expected to be, at the very least, a strong special teams contributor. And then if he can contribute as a number 2 running back, great. But, I just, people should be careful not to say like he's directly replacing Philip Lindsay, because while he's doing some of the same things, expectations for him are a little different, I think.
And Eric, the last couple of years, really ever since the Super Bowl, the Broncos' depth has really not been there.
Yeah.
That's been an area where they've been lacking. And I'm not sure if you necessarily are focused on that when you enter into free agency, but we've seen the depth really be challenged, especially later in the year when there's injuries and guys aren't available. While the backups and the third stringers haven't been as good as you would like, and able to sustain success out on the field. So, Boone is definitely filling that need as well. So that's a good point there, Eric. So, all right. Well, you want to get to some shout outs here, Eric, that point in the show. I did want to say first, right off the bat, that Rick Owens, he commented on our YouTube page last week, Eric, and said, more real content and a whole lot less nonsense would be appreciated. Rick, this episode goes out to you because all we talked about was football.
Yeah. Rick, normally we're going to have a lot of nonsense. That's what we enjoy. But in this situation, we just kind of cruised through the nuts and bolts. Hope you enjoyed it. Wouldn't get used to it necessarily.
This was a Rick type of show here.
Liz Manis is going to hate this episode.
Yes, exactly.
I will say, Phil, to Rick Owens, since you don't like nonsense, you're not ever going to be Rick of the Week if that segment ever comes back. A former segment of the Neutral Zone where we nominate one Rick per week to be a Rick of the Week, patterned after my name, of course.
Rick. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't count on that being you, Rick.
The goal of the Neutral Zone is to provide top-notch football analysis, first and foremost. But we also got to be entertaining. We got to be funny. We got to have some personality. We got to have some fan interaction. That's what this show's all about, Eric.
That's right. And unfortunately, most of the time we don't accomplish either of those, but we do our best.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point. Michael Pack commented and said, wow, thanks for reading my question. Much love to you all. See, people love to be a part of the show. So they comment and we read their comments here on the Neutral Zone. They like it. Michael Pack also says, I love you guys that you guys are on YouTube because he doesn't do Twitter. So hey, this is a way to engage, I appreciate that. So we should also mention that last week we challenged Roya Burton. She's in charge of the Broncos Podcast Network on Twitter. We challenged her. We said, hey, if you're listening to this point in the show, please text us. Let us know. It was a test, and I'm sorry to report that she did not pass the test.
No, I think you can say she failed about very, very poorly. And it's tough because she claimed she was a loyal listener of the Neutral Zone, a member of Neutral Zone Nation, that she enjoyed the podcast, and it was all a sham. So, Roya, if you're listening to this, you gotta find a way to make it up to us. I think maybe if you listen to this episode 3 times in a row, that'll be enough.
I was gonna say maybe she could come on the next episode.
Yeah.
Like if we're like, hey, if you're listening right now, we're extending an invitation to the next episode. So if
Yeah.
you're interested, just go ahead and let us know.
Yeah. That's true.
It's important.
Someone who always lets us know when they hear their shout out is Liz Manis. A big shout out to her.
Of course. Eric, my question is, the press conference today was in person.
Yeah.
No more Zoom. What does that mean for Liz Manis?
It can't be good for her job security, most likely. It's going to be weird to do things in person again. I think based on the number of people at this press conference, how spread out it was, the COVID protocols in place, that it's still going to be a little bit. Maybe she's got a couple Zooms left in her before kind of taken out to pasture. So we'll just have to see what happens.
I do think that people are sick of the Zoom. It was nice to be in an in-person press conference, but I will say the Zoom is very practical. It's very safe. It's very efficient. And it also is beneficial if the person you're trying to talk to is in a different part of the world.
Yeah. I'll also say, Phil, the setup that we had in this press conference is there were 2 microphone stands. And so you would get up and ask a question. And in a normal press conference, like during the season or Zoom, you might use the raise your hand function, or during a post-game press conference, you might ask for the microphone, or just during the season, you would just speak up and kind of throw yourself in there. You, of course, Phil, as a reporter, you know how to insert yourself. You could ask any coach in the country a question if you really wanted to.
You name a market and I'll get it.
Yeah, you would thrive in like a Philadelphia or a Chicago, one of those places.
Definitely Chicago. But
my concern today with the microphone stands is that often in these other settings, if somebody asks your question, you lower your hand, or you don't ask for the microphone anymore. You just don't use your voice. In this situation, there's a very difficult, perhaps chance that if you get up to the microphone, somebody has asked your question, you're just standing there with nothing to say. I mean,
I feel like that kind of happened to you today. I feel like the reason you're bringing that up is that kind of happened.
That never happens to me. I've always got another one ready, another one in the holster, in the chamber.
Yeah. And Eric, as the R that you are, when you ask your question and the answer you get it's not satisfactory. It doesn't meet your standards.
Yeah.
You, of course, grab the microphone back and be like, give me something better than that.
Yeah. I'm kind of like Herb Brooks in that Miracle scene.
Yep.
And I look to you. You're the one with the whistle, kind of like how in Miracle, the assistant coach has the whistle. And I just say again, and you go, and you're like, stop it, Eric. You're killing him.
See, Eric?
I'm like, again.
This is why I prefer to do my work one-on-one.
Yeah.
It lets me get the connection. Lets me get a flow.
Nobody steals your question.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know who doesn't enjoy this part is Rick. Rick's probably really angry.
Yeah, Rick is upset. Rick, please comment again on this YouTube page here. Also, smash that subscribe button down there. Smash it. Boop, boop, boop. But as always, if you'd like to be a part of the show, if you want to dictate what the conversation is, like you got something that you wish that we talk about, leave a voicemail, 707-NEUTRAL. You can be a part of the show. We'll play your voicemail right here on the air. You can also leave an email, Eric.
Yeah, neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. You got to type that into the to button, and then you type words into the email body, and then you hit the send button straight to Ben Swanson's email box, and then it prints out actually onto a little Polaroid, and he reads those and sends them right to us.
Right, it's just like right off the wire. It's like
exactly, and then
and he reads it, and he's like, "I got a message for you, boys."
Exactly.
Eric, we should note that you are in Ben Swanson's office right now.
I am, yeah. I'm going to trash it when we're done with this podcast, but that'll be in just a minute.
Let us know what you think on Twitter as well, at Eric Dalala with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. Non-traditional spellings, but also a good way to get involved in the show. Usually people just blast Eric, and he lets me know. So
yeah, exactly.
Bad takes, usually get that response. All right, well, maybe something else crazy will happen before we record next week's episode. Who knows? I mean, this is the NFL world that we live in, but we'll have it all covered coming up on next week's episode. Until then, for Eric Bilala, I am Phil Milani. You've been listening to
The Neutral Zone.